Transformers are in charge, hey, hey. The girls' room is full of men. They're grooming your children. Or we'll just let a migrant steal them, because Christians will forgive them. Now put on your mask and stick your head up your ass. Pedro and Manuel need a free hotel. We will give you the bill. Now take this pill and chill. You can't even sell lemonade, but here's a naked parade. Your streets look like human vermin, but at least you're not all speaking German. Welcome to the woke and gay. Letting people rob stores is okay. Remember, if you need to get mad, it's Russia and Iran that are bad. So pay for these wars and let the queers and whores spread their hate every day. Welcome to the woke and gay. Pedophiles run the BBC, but manliest is your enemy. A Smurf man making fun of Christ. Bearded drag queens, ain't it nice? Tell me again, there is no hope, because that rooftop had a slope. It's woke, it's gay. Why do so many YouTubers play with minors in an inappropriate way? Welcome to the woke and gay. Hope this song did not hit a trigger. If it did, well, you're just a you can't it, well, you're just
everybody who has a reputation apart from 9/11 all pulled back. And no, it's not because everybody's afraid that something's going to happen to them. It's because the Kooks took over. Now, let me just finish my point about the firefighters. The architects were the other experts. The architects, the engineers, and the demolition experts. This is what the 9/11 truthers always point to. But the New York City firefighters are also experts. They have a different kind of expertise. Their whole job is to go into very dangerous situations, risk their lives, and they need to know when to get the hell out of the building so they don't die.
Structural integrity.
So they have a certain type of expertise as well. And not only that, these particular experts were on the scene, whereas the engineers, the architects, and the demolition experts weren't. So yeah, we see that it looks like it was a controlled demolition. But here's what the 9/11 truthers never address, and I don't know if they even know about it, but they should know about it because they devote themselves to this issue. But there are transcripts that were published in the New York Times of the communications on the two-way radio between the New York City firefighters. And then there were also interviews afterwards. And they all said there was a big hole in the building. It was severely damaged when one of the towers, I think it was Tower 1, landed on it. And that's what degraded the structure to a great degree. And there was a huge hole in it. So when people talk about how, oh, that had to be a controlled demolition because the internal structure of the building would have slowed the collapse, they're ignoring the fact that the New York City firefighters are saying that, no, there was no internal structure. There was a hole. It was gone. And not only that, in all these transcripts that went on for hours, the firefighters are worried that the building's going to collapse. It goes on for hours and hours. Yeah, baby. It's episode 33 of The Whiners on May 8th, 2025. Jeff Norman, as usual, in Wilmington, North Carolina. Ryan Milton is in Moscow with a shaky internet connection. So he's going to be a little iffy as far as sticking with us tonight, but we'll see what happens. And Ryan Dawson is in a hotel in Japan. What an international show we have going on here. Ryan is an independent journalist. One of his specialties is 9/11, what happened. From Ryan's point of view, he thinks it's more important who did it. We'll get into that. And just so you know, Ryan is not copying an attitude with the shades, although maybe he'll copy an attitude for some other reason. But
that's coincidental. Yeah.
Yes, that's coincidental. What's going on with your eyesight, Ryan?
Macular degeneration in one of my eyes, so I'm supposed to be shading them from sunlight and screens. So I'm doing that. It's getting better, but I'm just following everything. It's my eyes, pretty serious, so I'm going to do everything they ask. Yeah. Sorry couldn't have wine with you guys, but it is May 9th here, and it's like 8 in the morning, so I'm not that Irish.
Right. I was saying before we went on that, you know, some guests, of course, don't drink alcohol at all, and others may not want to do it at the exact time we're doing the show. But I usually kind of encourage it a little bit, but I didn't even bother with you because I knew it was 8 a.m.
Yeah, I don't even have anything, but
yeah. Right. Ryan, how's it going in Moscow? Are the drone attacks landing anywhere near you?
I think that they heard
Ryan Milton, how is it going in Moscow?
Yes. Well, I think that they heard that we were going to do this show, and so there's more drone activity tonight than we had the other day when we were talking.
Right. Well, I know we were up against some internet outages that were being done intentionally to make it harder for the drones to find their target. But right now, it seems like it's just more a matter of a lousy internet connection.
Well, the internet connection's been fairly decent, but I think the whole of the center of Moscow is pretty bad, no matter where you go, because I literally traveled all over the center of the city looking for good internet connections. And everybody said it's all based on the parade. It's a huge situation here, so security is number one.
All right, well, let's hope and pray, even though I'm not religious, secular prayers to you and everybody there. So I'm the asshole here on 9/11, although I think Ryan Milton kind of agrees with me for the most part. And Ryan Dawson and I know that we have some overlap. We both think that a lot of the activists who've been mouthing off for 24 years about 9/11 are kooks. Originally, though, Ryan, I wrote an article about it in Substack, and you can read it at civilknights.com, and it kind of explains how I feel. Mainly, it's about the firefighters, and I'd like to get into that a little bit with you, Ryan, before we get into what you do think happened.
Sure.
As long as we have you here, we, of course, should give you that opportunity. But just to kind of set things up, periodically, I do another podcast with Scott Ritter called Ask the Inspector. Periodically, the 9/11 issue comes up. He and I have both been known to badmouth the 9/11 truthers. We tend to believe the firefighters and have not embraced the controlled demolition theory, although I personally am open to it for towers 1 and 2. But as far as building 7 is concerned, maybe that was also a controlled demolition. But what I don't get, and maybe you have an explanation for this, Ryan, is that even if it was a controlled demolition, the 9/11 truthers don't say anything about this. I mean, occasionally they'll say, oh, some firefighters heard some explosions, or they might say the firefighters are afraid to speak out. But I'm going to show some of their statements here.
So they all have the same talking point, like no building ever fell from fire. It fell in a 7-footprint in 6 seconds. But it's all from Alex Jones. It's not even their own words. It's things they've memorized It's like, yeah, it wasn't hit by a plane, but it was hit by another building. Look at building 5 and building 6, which were also hit by building 1, and they're completely destroyed. It was missing the southwest corner. And they do this very misleading thing where they'll show, and this is with pockets of fire on the 22nd floor, but they're showing the south side of the building in the morning. They're not showing the other side of the building, the side that was facing World Trade Center 1. Every single floor was on fire and the whole southwest corner was missing. Nobody was surprised that it was going down. And that's part of why they screwed up the BBC when Jane Stanley announced that it had fell, even though it's sitting in the background. And her co-host was saying, we got reports that it has fallen or is fallen. It was confusing. But you and I know that's how New Yorkers talk. Like, that building's gone. It's done, as if it's past tense. But what they mean is it's as good as gone. And nobody was shocked when it fell. In fact, they thought some other buildings they were surprised some of the other structures didn't fall that were next to building 7.
Right.
And,
well, I mean, I think that makes sense what you're saying about the way New Yorkers talk, but it could be any number of things because it was a very chaotic situation. And if they were talking about expecting the building to fall and in different reports, you know, that game telephone, you say it to one person, then they say it to another person. By the time it reaches the reporter, you know, it might have been confused as it already fell. The thing that's weird about that is, like, why would, like, let's say the BBC was warned about it. Why would the perpetrators take that risk? Because there's no payoff to informing the BBC in advance. It's so absurd. Yeah. Am I right?
I agree. And the thing is, what they also set the bar too high. Let's say there was controlled demolition, just for argument's sake. They're acting like it couldn't have been otherwise, as if fire couldn't do that. And that's just not true. That doesn't mean it did do that, but you have to admit that it could. If you look at the Plasco building in Iran, steel structure fell from fire. They'll even point to the Madrid fire in Spain and say, well, that was steel and it didn't fall down. I'm like, yeah, but everything above the 23rd floor did collapse. The reason it didn't below that is they could get hoses on it. What they couldn't reach did fall from fire and only fire. That's what that does. And the other thing they point to is Larry Silverstein said, pull it. And this is another thing from Alex Jones, but they don't give you the whole clip where he's saying, well, there've been so much loss of life already, referring to the firemen who died in World Trade Center 1 and 2, that we thought the safest thing to do would be to pull. So we made a decision to pull. We pulled out and watched the building burn. All that meant is pull your guys out of the building, because we can't have another one collapse on more firemen like had happened earlier that day, where tragically a lot of firemen died in the World Trade Center 1 and 2.
There's the quote right there. We're putting it on the screen. He said, we've had such a terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull. He's talking to firefighters. What? But he's not talking about it like
memory. Yeah.
Well,
why would they be?
One thing I wanted to interrupt here a second, if I could, is that it's almost impossible to find photographs of the Building 7 from the south.
I have them. It is very hard.
Well, I know that you said that you had them. I was kind of hoping that you would bring them onto the show to show them, because I spent a fair amount of time looking for them. And
don't get rid of Ryan. Come on.
Well, I have those on my PC. I'm not at my house, but I have a guy that we have on Telegram that has them, so I can send them to you when we're done. Definitely. Oh, great. The whole corner is missing, and it's completely.
I mean, it's one thing. First of all, I don't believe that they'd be too fearful to speak out, because, you know, New Yorkers in general, compared to the rest of the population, aren't shrinking violets.
They don't give a shit.
Firefighters who risk their lives every fucking day, and who've lost their loved ones and coworkers and so forth, they're like the last people who would be afraid to speak out if that's what they believed. So, but in addition to that, what was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, it's the red herring.
Well, I mean, let me jump in here, Jeff. Is that you have the reports from Captain Boyle, Captain Chris Boyle, which you
Oh, that's
referenced
so, yeah.
in
In
the
addition to
article.
that, they go beyond like being afraid to speak out. They're describing a big hole
In
So why
detail.
would they do that? Yeah, yeah.
Standing next to the building and describing what they're looking at and hearing what's going on inside the building.
Yeah. I don't know what the explanation
Film
is for
was them
that.
saying that one's next. Like everyone expected
Exactly.
it to go. Mhm.
Yeah. So we have
My
the
9/11 theory doesn't hinge on any kind of Building 7 kookery at all.
all right. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But you mentioned the BBC report where what Ryan Dawson was talking about was that the BBC reported that Building 7 had collapsed before it actually did. And the 9/11 kooks said, oh, that's the proof that it was all planned. So here is that report.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
So here's the shot of the World Trade, rather Building 7, still standing, even though she reported. That's pretty harsh audio there. So I just wanted to show people what we were talking about. And Larry Silverstein, if you think, just getting back to his quote, that doesn't sound like something, if a controlled demolition had been planned, why would he be like chatting with the firefighters about maybe bringing it down through explosive? That doesn't make sense.
Why would you announce that we decided to demolish it or something? Like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Why would you say beforehand there had already been so much loss of life, so we made a decision? But like you're saying, so many firefighters had died, it's not worth risking trying to fight this. Just let it go. That's all. And in that Jane Stanley clip, as I mentioned, if you go about 16 minutes before that, her same co-host who said it is collapsing, and indeed it has, he used present tense and then past. But before that, he goes, it either has collapsed or is collapsing. He wasn't sure. He didn't know. It's because he's getting mixed messages. People are saying that building's gone. Other people are saying that one's next, or it's soon, or it's good as gone. He was hearing all of that. And that's, classic New York hyperbole. That's how they are. They're like Donald Trump. Everything's the most, the best, the ist of everything. That's how the best pizza in the world, like whatever, That's how it is. And it was chaotic and all, but they're not so stupid if you're reading a script to be like, hey, go get a shot of the building and say it fell before it did. But it is something you have to explain, because that does look bad. And it is something, hey, our government lies all the time about wars and constantly. It's not like it's a stupid thing, but whatever. But
the thing that gets me, Ryan, is that these people just aren't saying anything about what the firefighters reported. I don't know if it's because they aren't aware of it, or they blocked it out, or what. It's like if there was an accusation that Ryan Dawson murdered somebody in New York yesterday, and then Ryan Dawson said, wait a minute, I have an alibi, I'm in Japan, you would either withdraw the accusation, or you would say, oh, wait a minute, I don't believe that evidence. He's not really there. But what you wouldn't do is ignore it. You know what I mean? It's the heart of the matter. So if these kooks don't believe the firefighters, then they should say something about that rather than nothing. So what's going on with them?
It's like a cult.
Mm-hmm.
And they do the same thing with the Pentagon. They all think it was hit by a missile, even though there's a giant plane-sized hole with plane debris and the black box and the DNA of all the passengers besides the baby. They never found that one. It doesn't matter. They're like, yeah, but I didn't see, 4K footage of it in slow motion like Hollywood, so it didn't happen. They have gone and told it on the mountains to so many people that reversing what they've said to everybody with the utmost dogmatism and arrogance is impossible. It'd be too much of a blow to their ego. So they keep going around. They have these groups called architects and engineers for 9/11, and they'll say X number of thousands of people agree with us, but it's not true. All they did is went and browbeat people and said, do you support an independent investigation of 9/11? And anyone that said, sure, they're like, see, they agree. That is not the same.
I signed the 9/11. I'm one of the 100 signatories on the 9/11 truth statement, which was just to call for an investigation.
That's all it is. It does not mean they agree with what their theory is at all.
All right, so we have one of our regular viewers is calling on the phone now. I won't call him a kook. He's a very nice guy. He calls in to ask the inspector of the time. He asks great questions. He seems to believe,
Somerville John.
Yeah, Somerville John. So let's give him an opportunity to say what's on his mind. John, I'm not going to call you a kook. I love and respect you too much. But what's on your mind?
Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much. Greetings to your international audience, and thank you for defining me as not a kook or any of this.
That's a left-handed compliment.
Yes. But I can tell you, Jeff, that I was in Germany when the event took place, and all of the news reporters on the German, on the Swiss, and on the Austrian TV were convinced that there was some sort of extra business going on. No one believed that this was a simple collapse. Everybody believed that what they saw is actually what they saw. So that certainly complicated the situation.
Oh, we're going to get to Ryan Dawson's theory.
Well, there was extra business in the Twin Towers.
He thinks there was extra business, but you were giving me all those 9/11 cliches when we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago. What do you think, John?
I think that the United States absolutely had to get the Patriot Act passed, and that was you needed to have something to do it, and certainly the 9/11 event kind of brought the United States government together and the citizens and said, hell yes, we need the Patriot Act. But there is other.
But that's not exactly what is being said by that Jeff is addressing, because that's almost the argument of the opportunistic taking or somebody leaving the back door open, so to speak, to allow something to happen. That's slightly different topic.
I think that we also have to remember that people are gullible. We have no real resolution to the JFK assassination. We have no resolution to the more bullets than the gun could handle problem with the death of Robert Kennedy. We also have no resolution to the 2001 anthrax attack, which the United States government really never found the suspect for. That just kind of, oh yeah, we can say this guy, did it because now he's dead and can't talk. Unless we get everybody strapped into the polygraph and ask them direct questions, I think that is the way to get down to the bottom. And, you can't lie to the public.
You know,
And
right before we went on,
I-
John,
The
right
famous
before we went
Caesar
on,
shot RFK, and Philip Zachariah and Miriam Ripley stole anthrax. There's your answers.
well, also right before we went on, Ryan Dawson told me the RFK files were released today.
Yeah, hours ago.
Oh,
Yep.
that might very well be. Then of course they'll explain how there could be 8 bullets fired from a 6-bullet gun.
First page is 13 shots on audio.
It was, you know, this is all a mess and it's all confusing. I don't know if anybody's addressed the 9/11 tape recordings that were made by the air traffic controllers at JFK Airport, or pardon me, at New York ARTCC. You know, who here knows about that?
What do you mean you don't know if anybody has addressed it? Who's anybody?
Well, is that something that everybody knows? The theater that went on there?
Ryan, I don't know what to say to that. I don't know anything.
I think there's been such an over focus on 9/11. I'm going to put this in scare quotes for anybody who's listening now, watching. 9/11 physics. That's all they talk about is Building 7. They're basically being led around by the nose by Alex Jones. And so then you get your other kooks, your Richard Gage and Judy Wood, and Dustification and Airplane Deniers and Hologram. It gets dumber and dumber every year. And so, like, airport recordings, and what did the FAA do? Did they shred tapes and stick them in different trash cans? All this stuff, like Jim Fetzer, and like, you have professional charlatans muddying the water. And what happens is, when I start to debunk A, they move the goalpost to B, then C, then D, and you're going to waste like 5 hours of my time telling you what didn't happen, when I could just tell you what happened and not have to like unbrainwash all the propaganda you've heard over years and years and years. Like, I almost get like physically ill, like COVID fatigue, having to listen to this sorry but dumb shit. And I would say, dude, that is just so wrong. Like, you're wasting your time. Al-Qaeda did 9/11. Al-Qaeda, just like ISIS, is not a wholly separate entity from intelligence agencies. Never was, and still isn't. It was created by the CIA and ISI. It was part of this clique from the Safari Club, the same people that ran the Contras and ran Contra. It should not be a big shock that intelligence agencies have a hand-in-glove relationship with terrorist organizations. They're doing that in Syria. I think in Syria, it's crystal clear what they did with Turkey and HTS, or used to be Al Nasser Front, the U.S. with al-Sham and the FSA, And you can see similar things with NATO and Ukraine, It's just, and this is like the big boy thing to say, like, okay, you have terrorist organizations, and it's just like drug cartels and many other things. There's a covert relationship with intelligence agencies, and we can go through with names and with the paper trail and money and really explain this in detail. But you're just spinning your wheels if you're going to spend all day and be like, well, the squibs, I think that building fell too fast based on eyeballing it. We're looking for nanothermite. And it's like, you had a foreign intelligence agency caught with a van full of explosives. This isn't rocket surgery. It's not that hard to figure out. What's hard is getting over the mountain of crap from Alex Jones that you got to get out of the way before you can start being serious. The anthrax point you brought up is a good point. They lied. They said that Atta went to Prague, Mohammed Atta, who flew the Flight 11 into the north side of the North Tower. He's the ringleader, and they said he met in Prague and senior Iraqi officials passed anthrax to him, and they blame the initial anthrax mailings on Al-Qaeda. And then they're like, and they got it from Iraq. So somehow we're looking for mobile weapons labs, which Judith Miller wrote about, the New York Times, and they go in and, you know, Colin Powell put that in his speech with cartoon pictures, because there were no mobile labs or anthrax. He's got cartoons in the UN making a case because the legal reason to invade Iraq was they're in violation of UN Resolution 1441, stipulating they couldn't have WMDs. One of the WMDs was anthrax. So they had these mobile weapons labs. It wasn't true. Well, so, okay, who brought up that Atta went to Prague story? The PNAC crew came straight out of James Woolsey, who's an Epstein guy. Clinton hated him, but he's an ex-former director of the CIA saying this crap. with the Czechs and with the country that's attacking Palestine. You all know who that is. Their security forces from that country said that they witnessed a transfer of anthrax from Iraqis to Atta. It is impossible to witness a transfer of anthrax between two parties that don't have anthrax at a meeting that never took place. But that's what they went with. And the note said, death to America, death to the place I'm not allowed to say because you're on YouTube. So who do you think did that? And then we have that same group caught in the 90s, right before the 1993 World Trade Center attack, breaking into Fort Detrick, where they do gain of function research on anthrax, and 23 samples of anthrax are missing. It's a long story, but it's like you can't start to talk about who did what because of Joan. That's what it is. It's these damn kooks. I'm like, I can talk to them blue in the face. You're like, what? Yeah, Bruce Ivins did not go around and drive to Florida and then to New Jersey and mail anthrax and here's the best part. Somebody mailed hoax anthrax to Judith Miller, the same woman lying about Rocky's WMDs that fed into the cartoon Mobile Labs myth. Her harmless powder. Why would you send real anthrax to people like Patrick Leahy of the Leahy Amendment, which would forbid military aid to the country I'm not allowed to say, and try to kill him, and then send fake anthrax to Judith Miller, who's up there lying and saying, oh, look, it all came from Iraq. By the way, she blamed 93 on Iraq, and she blamed the Oklahoma City bombing on Iraq. She blamed everything on Iraq. And this gets worse because those two letters were mailed on September 18th. But because all the planes got grounded and stuff, they didn't open them. The first death is on October 5th. But one of them to Tom Daschle gets open, and it has the letter, death to America, death to the country, not allowed name, Allah is great, 9/11, whatever. The exact same note was in Miller's letter. They tried to say, oh, Miller's with the fake anthrax, that was just some copycat attack. But how would the copycats know the contents of the notes that had not been opened yet when it was mailed? That proves whoever sent real anthrax sent her to fake anthrax. So the people sending her fake anthrax, well, she's lying about Iraq on behalf of the country I'm not allowed to say, that's who did it. And the people I'm not allowed to say, that's who got caught stealing anthrax in the past. And they're the ones that constantly lied about Iraq, went through the Office of Special Plans. They set up with Doug Feith with Richard Pearl in the Pentagon, where they lied about aluminum tubes. They lied about chemical weapons under the palaces of Saddam. William Safire chimed in on that. He got a Guardian of Zion award. And they lied about yellow cake uranium from Niger. Oxidized uranium, something you need to build nuclear weapons. That lie was so bad that even the CIA rejected it. Because as evil as they are, we can't really say they're stupid. They're evil, but they're not dumb. Like, you can't say this because the documents that was based on were forged. They had an obsolete foreign minister's signature on it. You had dates that changed from the beginning of the document to the end of the document because they didn't change them all. Had obsolete military seals. It was just absolute crap. But Michael Ledeen and Gorbanifar and all, they pushed this stuff. And that was on all the major networks. Like, oh, look, George Bush got on TV and said, we can't let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud. Condi Rice reiterated that. Dick Cheney came in there and said, we do know Otto went to Prague and maybe Saddam has reconstituted his nuclear weapons program. None of it was true. But you have this is the real 9/11. At minimal, they used the event to attack Iraq, who had nothing to do with it, and made it look like Iraq had some relationship with Al-Qaeda. When not only did they not have a relationship with Al-Qaeda, they were diametrically opposed to each other. And we invaded Iraq and probably killed
Ryan,
people over nothing.
Ryan, I think that the question of state-sponsored terrorism is definitely where you and I will completely agree. Anecdotally, I was working back at that time for the Executive Intelligence Review, and we were going to members of Congress, we were going to the Senate, we were using intelligence that other countries had already provided, but apparently the U.S. intelligence community was largely ignoring that there was going to be an attack of some significant size against the United States in 2001. In
The
fact,
CIA
the
withheld
question,
information from the FBI.
absolutely, this is part of where I'm coming from, but it had already come in from many other countries, and even Russian intelligence. I guess President Putin had at the time contacted the White House days before, saying, that we're seeing something. I think if you recall, Ahmad Shah Massoud was killed days before. That was related because he had been making certain warning statements himself. So I think that where you're going on this question of state-sponsored terrorism really is the issue, and the Cheney crowd opportunistically taking advantage of that, or as I like to say, they left the back door of the house open, combined with whatever incompetence or competition between the intelligence communities that existed that led to incompetence, that allowed this thing to happen. I think that's what's important, actually.
Yeah, and that's the line, because the government is so much more incompetent than people realize. And like they said, the sky is blue. I would go check to see if it didn't change. And a lot of it's incompetence, but it's sort of built in the way they compartmentalize things. The counterintelligence wing of the CIA, Jeff Gates explains it like there's a lot of bottlenecks in the organization, and that's the only part you need. And everything under it doesn't matter. If you have like Richard Blee and George Tenet and a few other on top brass, they could decide. Like they had a Bin Laden unit, but the Bin Laden unit wasn't after Osama bin Laden. They were more of like terrorism management than trying to prevent something. They were trying to flip things because they use these groups to their advantage in Chechnya, in Bosnia, and different places. They'll use them now in Syria. So it's like, they don't want to eliminate these radical Sunni groups. They want to weaponize them and throw them at their enemies. And that's what was going on. And so some of it's confusion, like, hey, is this one of our informants or not? But the FBI was onto it. I mean, they had a good agent living with two of the 9/11 hijackers, Nawif al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midhar. And there were a couple intermediaries in there, Osama Basnan and Omar Bayoumi, that helped them get a house, live with them for a month. I'm sure you know the story. And
yes, yeah, exactly.
They were trying to inform the FBI headquarters about this. The joint FBI CIA liaison was really just CIA. The FBI is name only and part of that Alex station. And Thomas Frills and Mike Figelli and then Richard Blee, they would not allow them to share information. It got worse, where Michael Schur's now wife, the queen of torture, not only did not share the information with the FBI, but lied and said that she did when she hadn't, so that they would quit pursuing it. And then these people run Gitmo. So what happens is the street clerks and stuff that they're recruiting, Mike Springman gets into this because he used to work at Jeddah with the fast track program to get visas into the US. He's saying these are just like absolutely unheard of nobodies on the bottom level. But the tier above that, none of these people go to jail. No one got arrested. No one got fired. If it is incompetence, if that's we're just really suck, then you should be fired, not promoted. And that's not what happens. So it leans more and more when you add it all up to intentional plan with incompetence as the excuse. It's kind of like bailouts where they're like, look at this piece of S I just sent, where they got all these subprime mortgages where they wrapped up, it's like a roll of ones with a 20 on top. They're bragging about how they suckered these people, but they didn't care. There's no moral hazard because they sold securities to third parties. So now it's their responsibility if it doesn't get paid back. But their excuse was, oh, no, we're just really bad at our job. Well, did you bribe the rating agencies? Like, oh, no, we just gave them good ratings and they weren't good, I guess. Like they knew, though. So sometimes incompetence is, how can you prove something's not just because somebody's incredibly stupid and missed everything? I mean, that's always an excuse, right? It's always possible, but they definitely.
Let's let Somerville John get a word in. He's not a kook, by the way. John, what'd you want to say?
I just wanted to remind everybody that there are quite a few people walking around that have a lot of information in their head, and they are not allowed to open their mouth. If I had said something, if Trump was here right now and said, John, tell me about your past, I would have to say respectfully, Mr. President, you don't have authorization to know. And there's a lot of people like that. And there's a lot of people that, you know, if I got the knock on the door, my computer would stay and I would go. So that keeps a lot of people piping down.
I don't know. Is there any evidence? Is there any evidence that something has happened to anybody who has spoken out?
Well, look, I got banned off everything for over 20 years.
Oh yeah, but hold it. That's true. But I'm not. I mean, many of us, we've been censored. You know, Scott Ritter and I have been censored. A lot of people have been censored. But that's not the type of fear that we're talking about. I know it impacts our careers and so forth, but the type of fear that would keep people silent is more like getting, you know, attacked.
Like Bill Casey disappearing, for example.
Yeah.
There is the equivalent of the Secrets Act in the United States that, you know, you are sworn to keep quiet. And I know that a lot of people know stuff that, unless they're prepared to go to Leavenworth and then afterwards be called a kook, you know, we'll keep their mouth shut.
Well, like Sibel Edmonds had a gag order put on her. She was the FBI translator that was trying to blow a whistle on the portion of it that she knew, and they were threatening her with jail. So there is some of that. But now with Substack and Telegram and so on, like, you can anonymously leak the information. It's not that hard to do. And I don't think it matters. I can explain the Kennedy assassinations, 9/11, whatever, and it wouldn't matter because the Kook movie's taken over.
Let me tell you something from personal experience. They know when you poop list. There is no anonymity. You got to be really, really good to hide your tracks. If you say something that hits a nerve, they will get you. I can promise you that.
Well,
and
you know,
all you have to do
you believe, John,
in Utah.
John, you believe what you believe, and maybe you're right. But the issue is, like, let's say the firefighters in New York. The issue is, like, what do they believe? What reason is there to believe that they have this fear?
Well, they could lose their pensions.
Well, maybe, but that doesn't seem like anything that would stand up in court. And by the way, there are firefighters who have spoken out, just not very many. They don't have very much to say that's persuasive. They've said they've heard explosions going off. Nothing has happened to them.
Yeah, you had 6 guys, 5 arrested and thrown in jail for years, who did illegal work on the fire prevention systems in the World Trade Centers just prior to 9/11, who did get caught, did get arrested, and did go to jail. And they worked for a fire prevention company that was a complete front. It just was some residential address in New York. They faked fire suppression credentials, like letters of credentials. It was not, this went to court. These guys got arrested in Tennessee, serendipitously, on this fake ID scam thing. Sakir Hamazov, we can name them all. Mohammed Farizai. These guys were illegally in the World Trade Centers working on the fire suppression systems that the Port Authority did not hire. Susan Nash from the FBI, like, this stuff is out. But the Kook movement's never heard of anything I just said.
All right, John, thanks for the call. See you tomorrow night.
Yes, gentlemen. Have a good evening, and Ryan, enjoy Moscow.
Take care. We love you, John. Not a kook, not a kook. So, you know, Ryan, I didn't even know that you use the word kook quite a bit to describe these people. I don't know if that's a thing with people who
I think Scott Horton started it, and I popularized it.
All right.
The Kook
so
9/11
you
Kook
are
movement.
calling Kurt Weldon a kook 3 times. By the way, this is why it's on the front.
Oh,
burner
he is.
again.
He said Osama bin Laden was being harbored by Iran and a whole bunch of dumb stuff. And,
right.
You know, this is what they do. I mean, they capitalize on rumors that already exist and then try to give them some sort of validity so that you never get to what happened.
Shouldn't
But
he know better, though, given his
Saudi
position?
agents that were giving logistical support to hijackers. That's enough. That's state support right there.
Now, but so I heard what you said earlier. I've heard you say it on other podcasts too, that you're frustrated that you have to spend time debunking all this nonsense. But on the other hand, I think it's necessary because you have not established control of the story, and I think it's necessary to discredit them, even though it's frustrating. And
I
now
know.
we have what?
You're right. I hate doing it, but I still do it. It's just
Let's take a look at a couple of clips of what put this back on the front burner. This is when Kurt Weldon, who's a former U.S. congressman, he was interviewed about 2 weeks ago by Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson asked him what well, let's play another clip
He
first.
said some true things about Anthony Schaefer, but then he added a bunch of BS. So I don't know. Go ahead and play the clip and see what he says.
All right. So, and also this reveals that Tucker Carlson believes Building 7 was a controlled demolition.
But what began to make me wonder, and I have no idea what happened to 9/11, but it's very clear that there's a lot of lying around it, was the collapse of Building 7. And all the wackos would be like, Building 7, Building 7. I'd be like, shut up, wackos. And then if you just sort of look at it, you're like, well, that is very weird, actually. No plane hit that building. And does this happen a lot when buildings catch fire? Right. Okay.
Besides being a firefighter, I work for the INA, largest insurance company in North America. I was responsible for training their fire protection arson people for 18 years. That doesn't happen. You never have a 47-story building just collapse, which this is. Even Donald Trump, I have a tape of him speaking on 9/11, and Donald Trump, which I'll give you a copy.
I've seen it. Yeah.
In his own words, says that's controlled demolition.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly looks that way. I mean, look, I don't know.
See,
It looks that way. It looks that way. You know, things aren't
What
always
does
as
fire? It looks the same way when fire collapses a building. Goes straight down, has squibs. It looks the exact same way. They're ignoring, like, oh yeah, it wasn't hit by a plane. It was hit by another fucking building. That doesn't usually happen.
A much bigger building. A much bigger building.
Bigger, heavier building fell on it, and they made a decision not to fight the fire because so many firemen had died. Usually, they fight the fire the whole time, and that does matter. You know, they had some hoses on the outside, but they weren't in there. It's like
another reason. By the way, another reason.
You're pretending like there isn't this greater evidence. You don't even need Building 7 at all.
But another reason to discredit these kooks, Ryan, is that they told me to have you on the show as if you would set me straight. But here you are agreeing with me. So it's like they don't.
Jeff, don't ever have Ryan Dawson back on the show because he agrees with you.
Well, you know, Mike, I've already laid out in just a few minutes the fact that they used 9/11 to go to war with Iraq. They lied about anthrax, that it did not come from Bruce Ivan. It wasn't from Stephen Hatfield. I laid out who had stolen anthrax in the past, who had a very big incentive to lie about it. And if you really look at every pre-war lie, it's the same incentive of the people who've been, you know, when Netanyahu came and talked about the countries he wanted out, that script that it's kind of infamous clip from Wesley Clark saying, you know, we're going to bomb
7 countries, I think,
in 5 years. And that's Netanyahu's book from the 90s. He's like, you got to take out terrorists, people who harbor terrorists, blah, 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 blah. That's his script. And who would want to get rid of Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, and Libya? We're on YouTube, so I won't say it, but the obvious place that Netanyahu's the prime minister of, that they are following his book on how to fight terrorism. That's what it was for. Now, you could still say, well, Al-Qaeda did 9/11, then after that, they opportunistically used it to go to war with all these countries. I'm okay if that's what you believe, but there's plenty of evidence to show that, it's a lot worse than that. This was the plan. They needed a new Pearl Harbor-like attack to have enough clout to get the public to go along with these forever wars in the Middle East. And it's just too many. It's too much to chalk up to screw up. It's not incompetence when you can't accident. It's not like, oh, you saw it as your forgeries are a great example. The wrong person signed the document. So you know that this is intentional fraud. It's not a mistake. It's a conscious lie. And they put it out there, and George Bush said it in his speech in Ohio. I think he said it again in the State of the Union. Saddam has gotten uranium from Africa. He meant Niger. The DRC they lied about too, but it was really bad. And you just can't get to the meat of it because these people like run around with
Ron, do you look at it as a mixed blessing that Tucker Carlson interviewed Kurt Weldon? Because I get that they're pushing a narrative you don't buy, but on the other hand, they're bringing the issue in general to a huge audience. Is that?
I know that's kind of like the JFK dump. It was mostly redundant things, but people hadn't gone over what we already knew, so it was still good because you got to go in and say these things that most people are hearing for the first time. And Tucker talking about 9/11 sort of brings energy back to that event. The problem is they're just going to be running in circles talking about Building 7 and some,
Tucker asked Kurt Weldon what percentage of the firefighters are on board with what he's saying. Here's what he said.
As your firefighters who were there that day or knowledgeable about building fires agree with you on
Well,
this?
I have the utmost respect for the fire department of New York. When I wrote the manuscript Able Danger, which I didn't publish because my lawyer said they would kill me back in 2006, I never published it. I'm going to publish it this year. Last summer in July, I took a draft copy of the manuscript, and I met for 2 hours with John Esposito. He's the chief. He's a great man. I have total respect for him. And John knows me. And I said, John, you know my respect for the department. And I said, yes, Congressman, we know that. I said, I want to give you this copy of my manuscript, and I'm signing it in honor of Ray Downey for you to keep in your archives. This is what really happened. He took it. I felt I owed it to the fire department of New York and their members. There has been this subtle pressure to the firefighters and to the officers not to talk for obvious reasons. You know what this involves politically. And look what happened to the chief of L.A. The female chief of L.A. comes out and says that the resources were taken away from her for the forest fires. And what does the mayor do? She fires her. That was just a few weeks ago. The firefighters are always a scapegoat. That's why, Tucker, I'm done with this. If it's the last thing I do, firefighters are not going to be taken for granted anymore. We're going to rise up. We're going to shake the country to its roots. Firefighters are not second-class citizens.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be.
But if they talk, they'll get sidelined. They'll be called crazies, even though they heard explosions. They can't be allowed to say that.
They heard.
Absolutely, it's on tape.
Yeah.
They did hear explosions.
Right. And this, by the way, I'm sorry, I stopped it too soon. This is Tucker Carlson obviously learning this for the first time.
They heard explosions. They can't be allowed to say that.
They heard explosions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on tape.
They can't be allowed to say that. I've heard it for years.
Yeah, they've been saying it.
Yeah.
What they heard explosions was in World Trade Center 1 and 2. And I'll lay out the evidence.
Is that the buckling of the steel?
Well, you've got what's underneath the World Trade Centers.
Subways.
Parking garages full of cars. And what happened in 93 was they used a Ryder truck to bomb the building. And on the day of 9/11, live, Pat Dawson and Rick Sanchez said police found a suspicious device of explosives in a van that they towed out to the Church of Dades, and they had the bomb squad looking at it. So there was evidence in tandem with the planes hitting of some sort of truck bombs. And it just got brushed under the rug because they're all like nanothermite and, putting bombs in every door. And, John O'Neill was killed
right. Where was the truck bomb exactly?
It was in the parking garage of the World Trade Center.
Well,
and then they found two other incidences, one of a van near the George Washington Bridge packed with explosives, reported live by Dan Rathers, and a whole bunch. All the networks said that. Interestingly, the next day.
More specific though, Ryan. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
Is the parking garage under both towers, 1 and 2, or what?
Yeah, there was a subway station and there's a place for cars. That's where in 93 they put a Ryder truck, but they didn't park it close enough to the wall, I guess. They had a huge explosion in 1993 with Ramzi Youssef and that crew that did that terrorist attack. His uncle, by the way, is Khaled Sheikh Mohammed, the right-hand man of Osama bin Laden. So the attacks are related, like the actual same family involved in 1993 pop up again as planners for 2001. And in
So
93,
what effect did that
practicing.
truck bomb have? It brought, I want to just get clear what your theory is.
Was it
What
a
effect?
practice
Did that bring down
session?
Tower 1, Tower 2, both of them? What was the effect of it?
well, I'll give you the evidence and you can make up your mind. So there were reports of truck bombs, of a truck with bombs that they found. And this will happen 2 more times at least. It's hard to know if it was more than 2 times because so much of the FBI reports are whited out and redacted. But they reported live on the news about a van packed with enough explosives to do great damage to the George Washington Bridge on every network there is. In the plan in 1993, the plan was to knock one tower into the other with a truck bomb and blow up the Holland Tunnel. That was the original plan. Were they to hit a bridge or not, no one knows what the target was of this van because they got arrested. However, the next day, when Bernard Kerik and Giuliani were questioned about it, Giuliani would never answer. He'd always turn to Kerik and like, no, let him answer these questions about that. The media asked him like, hey, what are these reports of people with a van packed with bombs here or on the George Washington Bridge? What happened there? He said, oh yeah, they made arrests. They arrested 3 guys, but there were no explosives. That's what Bernard Kerik, the police commissioner, said. Bernard Kerik's the guy who found a hijacker passport, by the way. But 2 weeks before 9/11, he was in the country I'm not allowed to name, getting a $250,000 loan from Eitan Wertheimer through Shimon Cohen and Steve Witkoff, who's now in the Trump administration. Kerik ended up going to jail for 6 different felonies and working with Gambino crime syndicate and all manner of crime. Larry Reyes was in there. He was an FBI informant that got beat up in a hotel with brass knuckles. It's really like trashy, typical New York. But this is the crowd that said, yeah, we arrested the guys, but there's no explosives. It's like, okay, let's say that's true. How did we get all these reports of a van full of explosives then? And then you have the other infamous van of the people celebrating the attack from the country I'm not allowed to name. And their van had traces of explosives from the bomb sniffing dogs. Now, bomb sniffing dogs, when it comes to explosive residue, it's super easy for a dog. It's not like certain drugs that like a person can almost smell it. Dogs, like it, they definitely had equipment in there that they had gotten rid of. They're celebrating the attack at Doric Tower. Like, hooray. They tried to claim, oh, we thought it was an accident. If you thought it was an accident, why are you out there high-fiving and flicking lighters and stuff? Like, what is fun about a horrible plane crash into a building and a bunch of people dying? And why'd you hang out there until another plane came and hit the other building? And
By the way, you just explained it better than you did on the Fresh and Fit podcast, because there you only mentioned that they were celebrating. And I'm saying to myself, well, that doesn't prove any culpability. What's Ryan talking about? But now,
well,
in fact, I've heard
I made a
Kooks.
5-hour movie, and I'm like, go watch it. I don't want to explain all the
Oh,
detail, but like, yeah, I can say, yeah. Look, these guys. So that was 3 people that were witnessed there by multiple witnesses, and they're there prior to the plane hitting. What they'll do, even in the serious people, they'll take the witness named Maria Septinelli. She's the one with binoculars. She's like the main witness, but she was not the first person to see them. What had happened is they weren't out celebrating until after the plane hit. So it's just a car. There's nothing to, exciting about that. However, 2 men doing a billboard had seen the moving company van there, and it was kind of parked diagonal, not even in a parking spot. They'd seen that there with another one behind it. The one behind it, those guys didn't get caught. However, I think they did. I think they're the ones that get caught in Pennsylvania later, but don't worry about that. They're in their car waiting and then they get out and they get on the roof and start acting like idiots. There was a request to Quantico of pictures from 8/31 when they passed the gas station in between Urban Moving Systems and Doric Towers. So they request that to be analyzed. The first plane hits at 8:46. The gas station to Doric Towers is like a minute and a half away. So sometime around like 8:32, 8:33, they'd been sitting there. And that is corroborated by the other witnesses who had seen them there prior to the attack happening. The woman with the binoculars basically like looked out when the plane hit. She immediately goes and they're there like instantly. So at least just as or right after the plane hit, they're already there. But other people had seen them, and it just gets worse because Dominic Suter, the owner of the company, he flees the country. They just leave stuff stranded. All these guys get interrogated. They all have different stories from each other, whereas everyone else remembers where they were on 9/11. And then Sivan Kursberg, one of the driver, when they got pulled over later, they end up being 5 people because Sivan's brother Paul and another guy named Omar Mamari get picked up from White Glove later. So they went from Doric, they went back to Urban Movie Systems. They took some more pictures. They went to White Glove, and then they came back to Urban, and then wherever they were driving, somewhere around, I think, Route 3, they got arrested because they couldn't get back into New York because all the Lincoln Tunnel and the Holland Tunnel and George Washington Bridge, they shut them down. So they couldn't get back to Brooklyn where the Kursberg brothers were staying. And the cops pull them over, but they didn't pull them over until around 3:56 in the afternoon because the main witness who called the police waited till her husband got home. So even though she saw them in the morning, she didn't say anything until later in the evening. And then the cops nail them right away. Then they go through Urban Movie Systems, got 16 computer hard drives. You've got the people who worked at Urban Movie Systems who are not from the country, I'm not allowed to say, who were saying they always had secret meetings in Hebrew and they hated America. It was obviously a front. Now, they will claim, yes, it was a front and we were spying on Al-Qaeda too, keeping tabs on them. But we didn't know they were going to do this. Like, oh, yeah, just celebrating it when it happened, though. We had no idea. Well, they knew, and the CIA also knew. And there were even elements in the FBI field office that had visions of that it was coming. They didn't know exactly what it was going to be. But I mean, they asked Rice, like, what is it called? Bin Laden determined to strike America. You had the Bojinka plot from Ramzi Youssef, who attacked the World Trade Center in 1993, saying they're going to use airplanes to attack targets in the U.S., including the World Trade Center. You know they're going to flight schools, but gee, I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, what year was the truck? There was a truck bombing at the World Trade Center. What year was that?
1993.
Wow, that's the year. And this story, I've highlighted the date of the story. It was from 2017.
Yeah, Macintosh dry run 1999. Tried to get in the cockpit of an airplane, and I think they were going to DC, and they had to land somewhere in the Midwest. And these guys worked with an Al-Qaeda recruiter in Arizona. That's who had rented their car. And so they knew that they had ties to Al-Qaeda. They're like, oh, we just thought it was a bathroom. No, you were trying to get in the cockpit. You were testing out security on American flights. They worked for Al-Qaeda, but then again, a lot of people in Al-Qaeda covertly work for counterintelligence, and they're on that payroll. And they are protected by people in the CIA, people we can name. And we knew that they knew, especially the 2 West Coast hijackers, Nawi Hazmi and Khalid al-Midhar. They knew that. They knew who Thalmeri's handler was at the Kurdish Mosque in San Diego. They knew that about Zawahiri's crew and all that later. They knew about Mohammed Zammar being the bagman in Germany for that cell. They had their phone numbers. They had tapped their phones in Yemen at that cell. They knew about Al-Jarrah. They knew about Muhammad Atta, and no one acted on any of this. And then it's like, well, incompetence. They're like, how much incompetence? I mean, you can think that. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe they just are that dumb, but I don't think so.
Ryan, a question I have, you mentioned it briefly, is the Oklahoma City bombing in this context. And what could you say about that?
Well, they tried to blame that completely on McVeigh. He did it all by himself, is the official story on that. And that was also a Ryder truck bomb, very similar to what happened in 1993. And he would say, or he had said, he was motivated by what happened in Waco. And what happened in Waco was definitely atrocious. I mean, they just burned those people. Who used chemical weapons on their own people? Clinton did, not Saddam.
Right, that's true.
But Andre Strassmeyer was the driver of the truck. The LA Times has least they got to see it, but they wouldn't release it. There are two people in the truck. He's the one that goes around the back and looks at his stuff. McVeigh's in that video too, so he did it and he deserved what he got. But McVeigh did not do that alone. And I don't know what the point is of covering that up. Just how connected is Strassmeyer? I know he's got some family in German government and whatnot, but there was so many spooks and informants and white Aryan resistance in these groups that they were penning the OKC on. And it was weird because HBO had pumped these groups up. They had this like skinhead special with Bill Riccio and all this crap. And, you know, Terrence Trinidad and stuff, people got tortured who had nothing to do with it and died in jail. And then their lawyer got killed. And so there's a lot of smoke around that one, but it never really got resolved. And I think the reason was because in 1995, the internet was just a little baby. You know, you had AOL. I was banned on that too. And so by the time people could share enough information, it was kind of old news, which is sad. You know, hundreds of people, over 100 people died. And people like, what happened in Oklahoma City? Two moon-shaped like crescents there. People were finding secondary explosions. Oh, at least that's what the news was saying. We found this, we found that. So what was going on there? And a nursery got hit too. But what they did instead was they blamed the whole thing on William Pierce, who wrote the Turner Diaries, which vaguely has a similar scenario on it. He was the head of the National Alliance, some white separatist group out of West Virginia or something. And he had a radio show and stuff. And that guy who was William Pierce, I mean, he's dead, so I don't mind giving him fame now because it doesn't matter. His birthday was 9/11, and he actually had predicted that they would attack the World Trade Centers and blame it on bin Laden. So did William Cooper. William Cooper was Alex Jones before Alex Jones.
Yeah, but
William Cooper, who wrote Behold Pale Horse, this one.
Yeah. He used to spread kook stuff all the time. And maybe when he learned like they're going to kill Americans.
Naval intelligence or something like that.
He was in Oni. Yeah. And he had a weird death shootout with the cops. And yeah, there's something there. But like, I don't need to speculate about all this. It's very interesting. It's worth having a conversation about, but like, I can talk about what I know and studied for 25 years. Or 24 years, like I'm certain about the Saudi and the country I'm not allowed to name connections.
Have you been on the Jimmy Dore show?
I have, but not to talk about 9/11. Like,
oh, okay. Because
he doesn't know that I know all this stuff. Like,
well, this is what I'm getting at. I don't know if you know, but last night Richard Gage was on the Jimmy Dore show.
Yeah,
and he was pushing all that architect stuff. And like you said, you know, he was claiming that he's got 3,000 architects that are with him on this. I don't think he does.
Who agreed to do an investigation. This is how bad the architects and engineers 9/11. Okay, sorry. I get triggered.
But then after he claimed to have 3,000 architects on board, right after that, he says that he thinks a third of them don't even know that there was a third building that came down. Like, dude, how can you be citing your 3,000 architects as good, you know, corroborating witnesses or experts if they don't even know the building came down? So he sounds like a real kook. Am I right?
He is Captain Kook. Him and David Ray Griffin, they went on like National Geographic and they did this test of like how a plane could smash through a bunch of walls. And I just thought, this is so stupid, because if you're an architect and you want to say something, a claim about the Pentagon, for example, the first thing you might want to do is know the architecture of the building. Don't you think that would be a good idea to have a blueprint and know what the building looked like? From an aerial view, when you look at the Pentagon, it looks like a bunch of rings. So it looks like a plane would have to smash through a bunch of rings. Hey, those rings are only on the upper floors, and there's basement levels too. The bottom floor does not have, they're not walking through wall, door, wall, door, wall, door. It's smooth. And where that plane hit, it went through two walls. It made a big impact zone and it came out the C ring. That's it. It smashed through some sheetrock and stuff, some regular internal walls. There are not steel reinforced walls or any of that stuff. It's not going. They're like the soft nose cone of a Boeing 777. Can you? Dude, it's not the nose cone. It's the landing gear, which is steel. And you know that because there's fucking landing gear in front of the hole in Ring C, tires and everything. They don't like, if you don't, the building's shaped like a crown. So you've got it's like, so on the top, that would be impressive. Bap, 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 bap. On the bottom, it isn't like that. If you don't know what the architecture of the building even is, then any claim about the architecture, if your premise is wrong, your conclusion's irrelevant. And it's like, God damn, there's a huge hole on the first floor. And what he did, Richard Gage will lie and be like, I didn't get this from Loose Change, but he used slides from the movie Loose Change in all his early presentations. He absolutely did milk off that movie. And what that movie did from Three Stoners is they only showed you the hole in the second floor. And like, ooh, look, it's only 18 foot wide. Do you think a plane fit? And they go on and on about how a plane can't go into an 18-foot hole. It's like, yeah, I agree. Now show the first floor. This is a huge airplane-sized hole in the first floor. You're always showing the second floor hole with a bunch of water under it or a car parked in the way. The angle, like, how could you possibly angle every photo you used in a film and avoid a giant hole in the first floor in every single one? It had to be on purpose. And then he had Rumsfeld accidentally slip up and say, oh yeah, he said there was a shoot down of a plane, and he talked about like a missile hitting the Pentagon. Like, yeah, Rumsfeld, okay. There's debris of the plane all over the building, and they went in, their DNA of those passengers is at Walter Reed. Like, they're saying, well, there's only a little clip of 5 frames of something going and hitting the building. I'm like, yeah, here's why. First of all, they didn't confiscate. I'm sorry, I got really triggered on this shit, but like, they didn't confiscate 87 cameras. That's one of their talking points. That's from an affidavit about 9/11. Almost all of those cameras in question that they went and grabbed are about the attacks in New York. And they only had 2 that showed the first plane hitting in New York. The rest were all the second plane, because everyone's filming the hole, and then they catch the second plane serendipitously. In the Pentagon, most of the cameras are in the Pentagon, not outside. And the ones that are outside are pointed at the doors where people go in and out of the Pentagon. And they're designed to film people going in and out of the Pentagon or in the parking lot. They're not designed to catch an airplane going 300 miles an hour and hitting a random wall, because they don't have a camera just pointing at a wall in a bush all day. They have them pointed at the entrances. Duh. That you got one is from far out from a parking one that shows the cars going in and out that has that wall in the background. It only has 5 frames because most people don't walk at 300 miles an hour. So they don't have a camera like super slow Steven Spielberg stuff to catch a plane hitting. But who cares? Like, it's kind of blurry if something zips by, but it flew over Virginia. It flew over, I-495 and 395, and hundreds of people saw a plane go to the Pentagon. Nobody saw it fly away from the Pentagon, because it hit the Pentagon. The plane is still in the Pentagon. You've got engines. You've got the landing gear. You have a broken black box. You've got seats with charred bodies. Like, God damn. And they act like it just evaporated and disappeared. I'm like, no, it didn't. It's there. There's photographs of the bodies still in their chairs and everything. I don't know. And they just Google Pentagon debris and you can see plenty of it. But they have well, this one reporter said he didn't see any debris. I'm like, yeah, it's Tom and Jerry cartoon. Most of the debris is in the building because the plane, that's how momentum is. They'll say, hey, there's not a on the lawn, which is hilarious. Hey, the lawn is not next to the building. The parking lot's next to the building. They don't have people park their cars and then walk across the lawn and get in the building. And that's funny is the parking lot and some of the lawn does have debris all over it. So even if everything they say about it's a lie. And the reason it's important to lie about the Pentagon is because if you don't have an airplane hitting the Pentagon, then you don't have the hijackers who were on that airplane that hit the Pentagon. So if you don't have the Flight 77 hijackers, then the paper trail back to Saudi Arabia agents giving them money and logistical support and all that, and the fast track program and visa, that all disappears. And the same thing with the phone calls. It's on an air phone, which are designed to make calls. And it's very important. In Flight 93, they're talking about 3 hijackers instead of 4. the fourth guy who's supposed to be Al Jarrah, who's supposed to be the pilot of that plane, is not the pilot of the plane. And you know how we know? Because even the other hijackers, because we do have that black box, it was played in the Moussaoui trial for the families of the victims, and we have the transcripts too. And they're talking about Saeed Al-Ghamdi. They're screaming his name and give up, up, down, down, telling him what to do to shake the plane. This is what went down to Shanksville. So Al Jarrah was not the pilot. Al Jarrah also never opens his mouth. He never even says Allah at the end or anything. He's not on that plane. But they found his passport with a little burned corner, so that proves he was there. And here's what I found very coincidental. Zaid al-Jarrah had two first cousins pop, Youssef al-Jarrah and Ali al-Jarrah, who worked for the country I'm not allowed to name's intelligence spying on Hezbollah.
We can just
what
say
a coincidence that not just a foreign country's intelligence agency has family members of a 9/11 plotter.
This country that you're not allowed to say, I'm going to take a wild guess.
Somewhere between Gaza and the West Bank, or Egypt and Lebanon, somewhere in there. Yeah.
We may have to get here. Here's Somerville John still pushing these cliched arguments. By the way, John, I think that first of all, that's irrelevant, and secondly, it's not entirely correct. He had a what's that? You can't see it? He says he says Silverstein collected twice for the one attack on 9/11.
False.
Exactly right.
Silverstein tried to collect twice and failed. Right. They told him to eat crow. And they're like, he got terrorism insurance.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he? He got attacked in 93. Why wouldn't you get terrorism insurance?
Yeah. Why wouldn't he want to collect as much as he can and have the insurance company live up to the terms of the policy? So what? What does that prove?
I mean, I don't want to defend.
By the way, John is not a kook. John is not a kook. He just agrees with the kooks. All right. So what can we do, Ryan, to help you and your narrative get more attention and, as compared to the kooks? So what are your thoughts?
I thought about this. I don't know if there is a way. Like, I think there's always going to be a circle of people. Like, I have a lot of people in private be like, man, I thought you were nuts until I saw your documentaries. They're like, I think you're really onto something. I've heard the same thing about my Kennedy research. People like very well known. And what's sad is the first time I met Scott Ritter in person, we were having a grown-up discussion about anthrax. And I was very excited to tell someone of his caliber, like, what do you think? Like, if you can debunk this, good. I don't care. If I'm wrong, great. I can win. But some people came in the middle of the discussion and just started Richard gauging the whole thing. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to think I'm fucking nut now. And which he did, it took a while to win him back. Like, I would want someone, because he knows a lot about Dugway and all that I'm not privy to. And so I wanted to pick his brain, but I got interrupted. Like, wherever you go, these kooks are everywhere. They've all heard the Alex Jones, Richard Gage, loose change, So it's not the government that's protecting this. It's morons. You don't really get that with the Iraq war. Like, everyone's like, yeah, that was a conspiracy. They lied about WMDs. Kind of with Syria. Like, yeah, they definitely not so covertly funded ISIS. Iran-Contra. People got convicted of conspiracy. They got commuted later, but there was a trial. Ollie North got raked through the coals, and that this is something our government does. And they ought to know, and they kind of know about BCCI in Afghanistan, but then it ended. Like, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. It went through Riggs. Riggs Bank was paying these guys. I'm not sure. I would have to be on a show with Tucker or somebody of that caliber to lay it all out. And I don't think that's going to happen unless I put out another better detailed movie and make it free. And that's the plan, is sometime around August or September. And that's just coincidence. Like, that's when we think it'll be done. That's what we're going to do, is put that out there and make the case. And I'm making it a series this time instead of a 5-hour movie, making it like we're going to go over everything and, come what may. And hopefully, and I'm writing a book in tandem with that too. I'm doing everything I can. Like, I need to be on a show that reaches enough people to go through it chronologically. And I don't want to spend any time saying this guy's dumb, this didn't happen. Just say what happened. I'm like, here's the case. Here's who lied. Here's who did what. Here's what we know. I think it's going to shock people. Like, what do you mean people were doing illegal work on the fire suppression system of the building? Like, yeah. You know why you don't know that? Because everything you've ever heard is from Jonestown. And they completely monopolized that event. And it's sad because it did lead to a war.
I've been working with Scott Ritter since the early 2000s, and we used to do a lot of events back in that day. That's when the Iraq War was quite a hot issue. And, almost every event we did would have at least a couple hundred people. And then Scott would take questions afterwards. And the most obnoxious people in the world were the ones who confronted him about 9/11. They were so disrespectful, so obnoxious, that it's almost beyond belief. Almost beyond belief.
And they don't realize it. They're so abrasive. They'll interrupt people who are talking with some sloganeering stuff like "No building fell from fire" or just something dumb, And it's kind of like religious kooks. Like, people don't want to be part of your religion because of the extremist elements within it. Other people might just not believe it anyway for other reasons, but they don't understand, like, this is a very serious issue. The 9/11 victims' families have dug up some really great information. Some of it came out last year. Like, we found out who Muppet was. That was one of the agents, Abdullah al-Balazi. They have been getting more information every year, but there's nowhere to put it. And then I'm not allowed on YouTube, I'm not allowed on Meta, I'm not allowed on Discord, I'm not allowed on PayPal, there's like 30 things I've been banned from. I do have a Twitter, but I wasn't allowed on Twitter until 2023.
Well, you also have a website. We've been flashing it, right? That's your Substack, Ryan.
I got a Substack, but Substack's kind of new too. It's like, for me, it's been like, I don't know, 6 years or something. But in the beginning, Substack was small. They've gotten, I think, 5 million paid people, but there was only 4 million 4 months ago. So they're definitely growing. I think Substack's where it's at. Like, I think that's the place.
Is that where you make your money now?
My money is almost exclusively Substack. Twitter doesn't make anything. Right. And I'm not allowed on anything else. I'm not even allowed on crypto exchanges. I got banned from Coinbase, all that stuff. And I'm like,
having people,
you're a threat to the system, they'll ban you.
We had Megan Murphy, who calls herself the most banned woman in Canada. I don't know if you're familiar with her, on a couple of weeks ago. So that's our specialty.
I think Jeremy McKenzie's the most banned person out of Canada. He's not a woman though, but yeah.
Well, that's it. Now, there's nothing wrong with making money, but on the other hand, maybe this is what's motivating Richard Gage. That's from his website.
Oh, he did not talk about the country we're not allowed to name because it, quote unquote, was bad for the brand.
Estonia, yeah.
Estonia, yeah. Left-handed estimates, yeah.
All right, so before we let you go, if you don't mind, a few more minutes. I'm just looking at your X feed, and it's not like you talk about 9/11 very much necessarily nowadays. You address plenty of other issues. There was one tweet, if I may use the word tweet for old time's sake, that caught my attention. I'm thinking about that, and I go, this must be a clever joke about something. And I'm trying to figure out what it means. And I have to confess, I can't figure out what Vaseline has to do with the India.
Well, the thing is, this is me responding to all these people who just don't care that the largest country in the world, India, and another very large country might have a serious war where millions of people could die. And Vaseline's a reference to masturbation. It's kind of like the civil war in Sudan. No one gives a damn. I don't know why, but they're just like, oh, India and Pakistan are going to war? Awesome. I'm like, it's not awesome. But so I call them kind of inside baseball. I used to call these people the jack off missile Johnnies.
Okay.
And so,
all right. Well, guess who?
People who follow me a while. Every time I post a Vaseline thing, it's like I'm making fun of the jack off missile Johnnies because these are nuclear powers. This is a serious thing. It's so stupid. They should not have cut off the water to Pakistan. And I know they'll point to and say, well, there's 26 people died, but this didn't start a month ago. This has been going since the partition in 1948. So many mistakes have been made. So many off ramps have been missed from both of them. And I don't want a war between India and Pakistan, but that seems to be, they're like, break out the popcorn or something. Like, are you serious? Do you know what? Okay, if you have no moral problem with it, think of the economic impact that would have, at least.
Well, you're talking to two people, Ryan Milton and me, who last week had on as our guest Salman Ahmad, who was the, I think, Minister of Culture. Was that his title under Imran
Yeah,
Khan?
culture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we were talking about, the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. So you don't
There
have to
needs to be
convince us.
global pressure on that. Like, it's the same thing with North Korea. We should be talking to them. There is no military solution to that.
That's right.
Don't John Bolton it this time.
What's your X handle? You see how we have under our names our X handle. We should put that under your name.
It's Rye Liberty. And I picked that thinking it didn't matter because I did not know it would be what I am. So
I'm going to put that there for you now.
I think I was like, it was during the Ron Paul movement. And I'm like, I'm just going to put Liberty in the name. So Rye Liberty, R-Y.
Did I get that right? Did I spell that correct? You see it under your name now?
Isn't it RY underscore?
No, it's just RYLIB.
Oh, right.
Like Rye Liberty, all one word.
All right. So follow Ryan on X. He has in the hundreds of thousands of followers. Unlike Ryan Milton and I, who can only dream of that kind of a following.
That's right.
Well,
it's because we're using too much Vaseline, I think, Jeff.
That might be it.
I got dark humor for sure, but the X is like not a serious place like Substack. It's kind of, or Telegram even. It's like let off steam sort of thing. Because I tried to be serious, and it's just like the level of discourse on Twitter is somewhere in the lower basements. So just gave up. Just lean into it.
Well, I mean, you can use X to drive people to your Substack. That's the value.
You could. X limits external links though, so it's not a good on ramp, but it is better than nothing.
Specifically for Substack, they've actually been having fights about that.
Yeah, but I came up with a workaround for that. So you put the link in and it won't display the image. So I just do a screenshot and this is what I post.
Yeah.
If you just put the link, then it won't display. This may be too much inside baseball now. I don't know if everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Now, getting around the media censorship and sometimes just media competition, because hey, Substack won't let you embed tweets anymore either. So this is both of them doing that. But because in the beginning you could take a tweet and stick it in your article. Can't now.
The dispute is about stealing data or something. Do you understand what their dispute is about between X and Substack?
Nah, I'm a nerd, not a geek. So I don't know the tech stuff.
All right, John in Somerville is not a kook. You're not a geek, and we've established. And Ryan Milton is very muscular but strangely effeminate. All right, Ryan. Well, I'm glad we had this talk, and I don't know what took me so long to take to defer to the clamoring for you, and people were clamoring for you. You're a cool dude in a loose mood, and let's remind folks who maybe weren't tuned in at the beginning that you're wearing sunglasses not because you're copying an attitude, but because you have an eye condition now.
Right. So, I'm not Johnny Roselli wearing shades everywhere he goes. It's just I'm blocking.
I hope you get well.
Yeah.
It's
scary.
It usually doesn't hit people my age. I'm like, oh, hooray me. But I took this, they give you a shot to the eyeball, which is always fun. Ooh. But they said I'm taking to the medicine and recovery faster, like in the bottom 3%. So like only 3% of people usually doesn't work, and they have to do this for life. I only need like 3 more shots and I don't have to do that anymore. So doing all the precautions, taking my lutein, eating the right types of foods, that helps some. Macular degeneration is in like a vein goes behind your retina, it's pushing on it. So it's not in the eyeball, it's behind it. So there's nothing they can laser, there's nothing they can't. All you can do is shrink the circumference of the vein. But you have to do that slowly. You don't want to shrink all of it. So
and you're being treated by Japanese doctors because you live in Japan, is that correct?
I did live in Japan. I live in South Korea. So I have a South Korean doctor, Dr. Moon. She's great. And I'm in Japan now because of the expo. We have the World Expo here. So because I kind of lost work because I couldn't do screen time stuff. So I said, well, I speak Japanese. I lived there 17 years. I got a World Expo. I bet I can find some work. So I did. So do a little temporary work right now. And then I'll be back in Korea next week.
So you lived in Japan for 17 years, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been
Fully
in South
fluent.
Korea?
2005. I moved to Japan. I've lived in Korea for 2 years.
How do you like it there?
I like both places. I favor Japan because I speak Japanese, and my Korean is not on the same level, so I can't compare. Because Japan and Korea are not like a lot of places where nobody speaks English, like nobody. And so to really get integrated, you have to learn the language, or you miss a lot of opportunities and things. But it's apples and oranges. Some things are better in Korea, some things are better in Japan. So I don't know. I like them both.
And you have a wife and kids, or?
Yeah, 3 kids, 3 sons.
Wow. All right, well, you're an interesting cat, a cool dude in a loose mood. Let us know if you ever want to come back on. You don't have to wait for.
Hey, I appreciate the
Ryan.
opportunity, Jeff. You do great work. I watch your reports with Ritter too all the time. There is a Give Sing Go, givesinggo.com 9/11. If anybody wants to contribute to the filmmaking, we finished 2 hours of it already. And so I think, and then we did all the hard stuff first. So I think we'll finish that in a couple months.
So let's put that on the screen for you. Give me the URL again. What is it?
Give Sin Go.
Just givesandgo.com?
Yep. The same thing Kyle Rittenhouse used. So I feel like that's safe. Givesinggo.com. All right. It's already on the screen. And we're 89% of the way there. We had some shekel chats. One from OK for 10 says, fuck Lincoln and fuck Israel. Bravo. Yesterday, by the way, in the U.S. would have been the 10th, the anniversary of the birthday of John Wilkes Booth. Praise be his name. And then Top Chewy gifted 10 subscriptions to Ryan Dawson on Rumble. That's awesome. 10 subscriptions. So I don't know how that works. 10 people just get them or what? That is something they can do, apparently. I've seen that on other streamers. So now it has happened. Thank you, Top Chewy. We always get a fuck Lincoln and a fuck Israel. I need to make some sort of animation, maybe of Lincoln getting shot or Israelis getting red triangled or something. So every time somebody pops that in chat with a shekel chat, we can do a little video. That would be fun. Yep. Well, the audio is what it is on that. I was in a hotel. He said it was fine, and maybe it sounded fine on his end, live, but then in the recording it's a little watery, whatever. But anyway, catch us on Substack, and that's ryandawson.org. I just wrote a report on India and Pakistan on there. What's going on, what the two sides have, how shaky is this peace agreement, and so on. The 9/11 kooks are just a never-ending thorn in my side. We're going to have the definitive 9/11 film out later this year. And that's going to be that whole issue, and I never want to have to deal with it again. No other questions? Okay. I'm going to pop over on Telegram. So if you're following at t.me, ANC report, we'll see you over there. Peace. You guys following on Twitter, go check out the Substack, ryandawson.org. All right, here's some Fireblood.
Fireblood makes your piss yellow. Like a man. Manly yellow piss. None of that clear water, gay little girl piss. Man's piss. And the reason for that is very simple. We have all of the vitamins, minerals, and amino acids the body can need in one convenient scoop of Fireblood. And like a man, we have made it excessive. Are you the kind of person who's going to take a supplement which tastes disgusting with no flavoring whatsoever? Or are you going to be the kind of man who takes a supplement that tastes like cookie crumble and your pee's not even yellow because there's only a little bit of vitamins in it? Oh, but I've only got my daily recommended allocation of vitamin B12. I'm scared I might pee out too many vitamins. Greta Thunberg will get mad at me for being wasteful. I don't want Greta to come into the gym and beat me up. Fucking gay.